Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the Tanzu Wu Zetian, or Zetian Wu, depending on who you believe. But this is the latest 14 point something millimeter planar. And if you thought we were done with planar IMs in 2022, hold on to your shorts. We've actually got two more coming up after this. But for now, we're going to focus on the Wu Zetian. And this one's coming in at around 150 bucks, which puts it pretty squarely up against the Let's Sure S12. And there's also a little bit of hype behind this one. So I took the bait. I decided to go ahead and do a review for this, and I wanted to figure out, is this the best $150 planar, at least for now? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're watching now live and you have any questions about the Wu Zetian, any other planar that we talk about, or I don't know, life in general, I suppose, leave it in the live chat. At the end of the review, we'll have some back and forth conversation. But otherwise, shout out to Linsol for sending the Wu Zetian in for review. If you want to check it out, there's a link in the description down below. But otherwise, let's just go ahead and dive to the table and start talking about the physical aspects of the Wu Zetian. We'll talk about what comes inside the box, talk about the build quality and fit. Then we'll talk about sound, and then we'll pull in some direct competitors for exact comparisons with the Wu Zetian. Okay, so what comes inside the box? First of all, the box itself is fairly large and fairly handsome. I appreciate, I don't know, I think that's a bit more of a mature art than I see on a lot of IM boxes, and I kind of like that. So yeah, very nice looking box, but not just the box looks nice. I think the stuff that you get inside of it is also, yeah, it's well packaged. We'll just say that. It's well packaged for a $150 IM. You get plenty of ear tips, as you can see here. And I'll be honest, I just used whatever was stock on there. The one oddity to point out here is that they claim these are foams. These are just more silicone ear tips. I don't know if that was just a packaging mistake with my particular, but I don't know. There's plenty of tips there. I don't think anyone will be wanting for more tips. And then you also get this pretty beefy and, I gotta say, kind of awesome carry case. So it's got like a semi-hard shell with like a fake pleather outer, and then it's got these beefy zippers along the side. And then you open it up and you've got a lot of room for storage up here at the top, as well as these little bespoke areas for the individual earpieces. Now this is removable if you wanted to just use this case without those little earpiece holsters. I don't know what we want to call that, the cradles. But I don't know, definitely a nice built case, if not a little bit on the chonky side, but that seems pretty useful. You could carry a DAP inside that thing. But apart from that, look, that's what you get inside the box, except for the IM itself. So let's punch in on this thing and start talking about the build quality of this IM. For starters, this cable. Generally, I think this is actually a really nice cable. It's not going to necessarily look like too much in terms of fanciness. Like, it's not a plush cable. It's just a relatively lightweight braided silicone cable, and I like it. Wow. The behavior on it is quite nice. You can see that it is not memory prone at all. It lies flat well, and it's actually still got a bit of weight to it, which is nice. Like, that's kind of what I like to see, is the balance between thinness and weight, because I like the heavyweight, and I don't like a cable that's too lightweight. And this one, I think, lines up just about perfect. You can kind of see exactly how well it behaves as I roadie wrap it together. That's about what you should expect from this cable. You do have a fairly small Y split, which I appreciate. You've got a functional, very functional chin slider that stays in place. And then, of course, you've got your preformed ear hooks up here with standard 2-pin connectors. If you're an MMCX fan, I suppose you will be disappointed, but personally, I don't think there's a big difference between the two. Otherwise, it's going to lead us into talking about the earpieces themselves, which I gotta say, I do appreciate that Tangzu's gone for a unique design here, right? This is a different pattern, different color even, than you'll find on most IMs, and I quite like that. Is it especially handsome? I don't know. I think it's pretty good looking, but it's maybe, I don't know. There's something about it that does feel a little bit on the cheap side. Maybe it's the plastic shells with the metal plastic on the outside. They're also pretty lightweight, which can contribute a little bit to that sense of quality. I'm not worried that anything here is going to fall apart or anything like that, but it just doesn't have quite the same feeling in the hand as something like the Let's Sure S12, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. Other than that, One thing I will point out is that this is, as far as I know, the only planar IM that's kind of got like this little wing style. Most of the other planars fit a lot like dynamic drivers where they're pretty flat or plain on the inside. This one's a little bit opinionated. Interestingly though, I feel like it doesn't contribute much to the fit. So let's talk about the fit. Generally, I think, the ingress egress is nice and easy and comfort is positive on this thing, right? So you saw that it fit in there. I would say that the size here is plainly a medium size. I don't think anyone's going to have any issues with the fit on this thing. What I was talking about with those wings though, a lot of the time what those wings will do is they will add extra stability for the IM here inside the concha. And I would say that the stability on the Wu Zetian is just average. Like it doesn't really feel like it fits any more securely than some of the other planars that don't have that sort of a semi-custom fit. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of a plus side in that it's not going to, or it's unlikely to be a comfort issue for some people because those wings can sometimes be a trade-off between comfort and security. But the downside is just that the security is just so-so. But again, that's kind of true for pretty much all of the planar IMs. But yeah, generally fit is fine, right? Fits in there, plugs in, comfortable, and it'll mostly stay put, but it is a little bit of a shallow fit. So as I'm talking and stuff like that, sometimes I can break loose my seal a little bit. Maybe if I played around a little bit more with the tips, I could solve that issue. But I don't know. There you go. I don't know. Generally pretty happy with the build quality and the aesthetic here on this set. I think for 150 bucks, it certainly lines up. Nice cable, better cable than most, and earpieces are certainly a unique look. So, I'm actually kind of curious for the people that are here in the live chat. Do you like this look? What is your opinion of this versus a more typical looking IM? Do you appreciate the purple color or not? Leave your comments in the live chat. We'll talk about that later. But for now, let's talk about how this thing sounds. And like I typically do, I'll start by just describing the sound signature, and then we'll get into talking about what I like and some of the things maybe I don't like so much. So the general sound signature that you should expect with the Wu Zetian is a V-shaped sound signature. A pretty basic V-shaped sound signature. That means you've got elevated bass, you've got elevated treble. The mid-range is a little bit scooped out, and it results in a contrasty sound, right? It's maybe most aggressive in kind of like the lower treble region, not so much in like the upper treble, which means that it's not going to be fatiguing, I don't think, for most people. And it does give vocals maybe a little bit of an edginess to it. So it is definitely in the V-shaped category. What I will say is that as far as V-shaped sound signatures go, this one's pretty tasteful. A lot of the times V-shaped sound signatures will come at the expense of tonal normalness, right? You might get some nasalness or nasally sound or honky sound or shrill sounds, hollow vocals and stuff like that. You really don't get any of that with the tuning here. So it is still a V-shaped sound signature, bass boost, and a bit of lower treble emphasis for sure. And the mid-range is scooped, but it doesn't really come at the expense of the vocal tonality. So that's good. Okay, so that's the general sound signature. What do I like here on the Wu Zetian? Well, for starters, I guess I just described it. Hey, if you're going to do a V-shaped sound signature, don't screw up the vocal tonality. Good job here on the Wu Zetian. But apart from that, I think what really makes this set stand out, why people will be particularly interested in the Wu Zetian, is the bass quality. The bass is pretty tight. It's not necessarily the meatiest bass. It's mostly sub-bass focus, but it's not anemic at all. It does hit with a well-defined attack, and it's got a decent bit of meat on there. I would say it's frankly the bass attack on this in particular is better than the other planar IMs that I've heard. If I'm thinking specifically about like the Tin Hi-Fi P1 Max, the Let Short S12, and the 7 Hertz Timeless. I think the bass quality on this set beats those sets, in my opinion. The only one that maybe would be a bit of a stretch would be the Raptco Hook X, but I didn't do that head-to-head comparison, so I don't know. The other stuff that I like on the set is that you just get some, of that familiar planar speed. The technicalities that you expect of a planar driver they're kind of all here, right? That gives you just really incisive transients. You get a nice, we call that speed. That basically is just kind of describing that like the sounds aren't blurring into each other, and it gives you a good sense of separation between the sounds. Generally just exhibits those positive planar characteristics here in the Wu Zetian. What, frankly, I don't know. I think you kind of guessed that. So what are the things that maybe I don't love about the sound on this set? And there are some. So like I mentioned up top, or at least I think I mentioned, look, V-shaped sound signature is not my preference. That's okay. I do like a lot of V-shaped sound signature IMs, but it's definitely not my preference. There's certainly worse ways to do a V-shape, but this is less mid-range focus than I like. I think the mid-range do get a little bit sacrificed here for the sake of the contrast. The contrast is fairly engaging. It's just not a midsy set. And I would say there's also kind of a bit of a rawness in the treble. It's not a sharpness per se, but there is a bit of an unpleasant rawness that almost kind of sounds like it gives certain like hi-hats a bit of a cheap feeling. And I don't really know a better way to describe it apart from that. It's not, again, it's not fatiguing, it's not irritating so much, it's just, it's not super high quality in the treble region. So those are my general thoughts here on the Tanzu Wu Zetian, but let me pull some things into camera as I clear this table so we can start talking about how this compares to a couple of other IMs. And one of these is the planar, and one of them is not, because I thought it would be worth just kind of reminding ourselves where we've come from, because a year ago planars were the exception rather than the standard, as they've kind of become. So what we've got here, the Tanzu Wu Zetian, $150 planar driver IM. It's like 14 point something millimeter. Over here we've got the $150 Let Shure S12, also $150 planar driver IM. And then up here finally we've got the more costly, the $180 Tanzu Hana 2021. This is a single dynamic driver IM, so different driver technology in this set versus these two sets. General sound signature, I'll just say up front, all three of these are some version of a V-shaped sound signature, but they do vary quite a bit. In fact, I've got linked to the frequency response on squig.link, where you can compare the frequency response directly between the Wu Zetian, the Hana 21, and the S12, but I'll describe for you what I hear. So again, the Tangzu, I would say, is a tasteful V-shaped sound signature. It's got clean vocal tonality. The bass is mostly sub-bass focus, but it's not a super lean bass. It's not like a Harman bass tuning or anything like that. And I would say that listening of the three, this one has the most recessed mid-range, but maybe also like the most macro contrast, which is just like the biggest difference between the mid-range and the bass and the treble, right? It just creates that biggest sense of contrast. In comparison, the Let Shure S12, I would say, is also kind of a tasteful V-shaped sound signature. Of the three, I would say this is the brightest of the bunch, which just means there's more treble energy. I would say it's noticeably airier than the Tangzu as well, and maybe a little bit better. I don't know, maybe just because of, maybe I'm placeboing myself, but there is better treble extension in general, and I think that contributes to a better sense of micro contrast, where this is better at kind of like the macro contrast, and again, giving you that really hard definition on the bass. This is a little bit better in that micro contrast, but maybe I'm getting a little bit too much into the technicality stuff. So we'll go over here to the Tanzu Hana 2021. Again, a tasteful V-shaped sound signature. Of the bunch, the Hana 21 is, I would say, the warmest of the bunch. It's got the meatiest bass, and it's also still got really solid vocal tuning. So that's how they compare in terms of tonal balance. If I were to rank them, I don't know. I feel like I probably rank the Hana 21 best, followed by the Let Shure, followed by the Tangzu, at least in terms of tonal balance. So in terms of the technical performance, so the stuff that's not just purely tuning, and maybe it's all tuning, but that's an argument for another day. The Tangzu, I would say that the bass is a bit tighter on this than it is on the S12. Again, I think this probably has the best bass of the 14 millimeter planars if you ignore the wrapped go hook. Again, I do think there is a little bit of an unpleasant rawness in the vocals that and just in the treble, that gives vocals a little bit of an edginess to it. And I would also say, because of that tuning, I think that the Tangzu is probably going to be the least forgiving, depending on the music that you're listening to. If you're listening to stuff that's poorly recorded, I think that the Tangzu is probably going to bring it out the most, if I'm honest. But solve that just by listening to good music. The S12, in contrast, I would say gives me a stronger sense of like head stage and a stronger sense of separation versus the Tangzu. I think there's a little bit more vocal focus here, and well, the downside is that the bass is softer, specifically like the attack on the bass. There might even be a little bit more mid-bass meat here on the S12 versus the Tangzu, but because it just doesn't like attack quite as well, it ends up just a little bit more blurred and a little bit less satisfying. Whereas in comparison, up here, the Tanzu and Hana 2021, I think by far has the best bass of the bunch. It's not a planar, so that doesn't ruin my claim that this is the best bass of the 14 millimeter planars. But this one I think has the better bass. Like it's one, it's meatier, but two, it's just got like more of that physicality behind it that I like, that I find. If you're going to elevate the bass, make it fun like that. And I think the Hana 21 does a really good job. I think you also, as a part of that extended bass, it gives the Hana 21 a really strong sense of depth. And on top of really excellent imaging, I think both the original Hana and the Hana 21 have fantastic imaging, which is just the positioning and the sense of 3D space and things in your music kind of creating like the sound field around you. I feel like the Hana 21 really does it next level. And again, that bass adds to that sense of depth with that sound field. So I really like that. So yeah, generally I would say it is quite smooth with everything as well. Whereas again, this one has a little bit of treble grit. This one can be maybe a little bit sharp in the treble because of its tuning. This one, the Hana 21, really is just kind of smooth with everything. The only demerit, I suppose, in comparison is that these do have maybe a little bit of extra incisiveness in the top end, where here the sounds can be a little bit more blurred together. Again, I think that I just kind of described like the sound stage, or sorry, the head stage and like the imaging and that sort of separation being really nice and clean, but like the leading edge of things is still interestingly not quite as sharp as it is on these sets. So if I were ranking these things in terms of technicalities, they kind of all trade blows in some way or another, but I'd probably still rank them the same way. I think overall the Hana 21 I find to be just the more satisfying in technical performance. And then finally, we'll talk about how they compare in terms of form factor. So the Tangzu, again, this is a look that either you're going to be super drawn to or maybe turned off by. I think it's a nice look, but maybe it looks a little bit half finished, a little bit half baked. Fit and comfort were good. Fit security was so-so, but honestly, fit security on all three of these is just kind of so-so. Mostly, are you going to like this unique look? The Lit Short S12 would personally be my personal pick of the three in terms of form factor. You got metal shells, which makes it just feel a little bit nicer than the Tangzu. Fit-wise, I would say that, again, ingress, egress is both good, are both good. Fit security is so-so. It's a little bit better here with these spring tips, but I maybe could have gotten better fit out of the Tangzu if I did some tip rolling as well. And then the cable that you get here on the S12 is quite a sturdy cable. Some people have complained it's actually a little bit too thick. I don't really have that problem, but again, I do prefer a little bit lighter cable. I do think, however, this is a very nice cable. And then finally, the Tanzu and Hana 2021. Aesthetically, this is definitely going to be the most divisive. Some people friggin' love the aesthetic of this Hana, which is very gold a little bit. I call it department store looking. I think it's okay looking. It is an all metal shell, which is nice. It feels well built. It's got a bit of weight behind it, even though it is the smallest of the bunch, by far the smallest of the bunch. Fit comfort is good. Ingress, egress is good. The only caveat here is that the nozzles are quite short here on the Hana 21, so fit security is not the strongest. I don't really have a problem with it, but it's, I don't know, all three of these, none of them are really strong in terms of fit security, and that's certainly true here of the Hana 21. I guess it's also worth calling out, I think the Hana 21 has by far the worst cable of the bunch. I mean, I'll wind this out for you. You can kind of see as it just wound itself back up into a coil. So, I don't know, it's not an awful cable, but certainly in comparison with these two excellent cables, it stands out as not that great. So, if I were to rank these in terms of physical form factor, I'd probably say the S12 again would be my favorite, and then these two are about on par, depending on your aesthetic choice, your aesthetic taste. I'd probably pick the Hana 21, but just by a bit. So I think that's going to do it for my thoughts here on the Tanzu Wu Zetian. Again, the latest 14 millimeter planar meme, but not the last of the year. I think I've got 2 more coming up pretty soon. That said, we do have to give this thing a score, and I think out of 5 stars, I'm going to give the Wu Zetian a solid 3 stars out of 5. This is a very solid IM. If you have your heart set on a planar, you got $150 and you want the best base, I do think that this is it. If you aren't set on a planar and you want the best base for the price, I do think that the Tangzu is a better pick. And if you are set on a planar but base isn't your priority, I personally would pick the S12. But again, $150 planar, base is your priority. Certainly not a bad pick. And if you want to check it out, I do have that linked in the description down below. While you're down there, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. It helps me out. Subscribe to the channel. It helps both of us out. Ding the YouTube bell. I don't know, it confuses YouTube, and I kind of like that. Otherwise, I do also have a link to my Discord server in the description down below. If you are not already part of my Discord community, I recommend joining it. We got some cool people there having conversation about audio and other things all day. And I guess with that out of the way, if you're here live, stick around and we'll have a chat. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.